All right. Erica, you can kick us off.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Erica Dinney, and I am the industry chair for the Networx and Telecommunications Committee of Interest with ACT-IAC. If you're not familiar with ACT-IAC, we are a nonprofit organization that brings government leaders together with executive industry partners to discuss and talk information technology topics and further that in the government community. I just really want to thank everybody for being here in person. There are a number of folks in person, a few on the line. I can see a few faces. That's really great. Amy and Debbie, thank you so much for turning on your camera. It's great to see you. And hopefully we can have a really great discussion here today. This panel didn't happen by accident. Most of you know we've spent about a good 6 months with 40 people across industry and across government coming together to discuss the GSA's EIS contract in the context of what's working, what are the lessons learned, where are the opportunities as GSA considers the next iteration of the EIS contract. Our project here in ACT-IAC, we're calling it Designing and Modernized NextGen EIS. And this panel here in particular is going to talk about new and emerging technology that might not even be on the market. And that was a big piece that came out of an opportunity area as we discussed the EIS project. In the context of how do you design a modernized contract that can accommodate new and emerging technology. So I just wanted to do a quick recognition of Megan Daly from Maximus, who spent a lot of time putting together logistics of this. So thank you to Megan and of course the larger team. And a big thank you to Sam Hughes of Hughes Consulting, who's going to facilitate the panel. Thank you.
Christine Palmer, Chief Technology Officer for our Federal Civilian Sector at Peraton. I came over here from DHS as Chief Enterprise Architect Engineer for a while, and I've got a broad background across DoD, the Intel community, a lot of different areas doing network rebuilds, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, everything emerging, but for the way that enterprise architecture looks today across all kinds of organizations.
Alan Hill, just retired from FBI over at the Federal Communications Commission. I have been a technologist since high school, dating back to IBM punch cards. So sure how many people remember those days. But I've been on all sides of the fence. Worked for Verizon, delivering services. Been on the Deputy Assistant Commissioner and then the Executive Director for when I was at GSA for EIS and its rollout. And as CIO, I can say that technology has evolved rapidly, but our approach to delivering the network it still has a lot to desire. And I think this next generation network infrastructure contract that replaces EIS is going to give an opportunity to deliver it the way that we need to at scale. We take the network for granted. It's like breathing air. It's there until you get bad air quality. You realize, like, man, I need to wear a mask. And so our network should be neglected. It should be the priority list because without it, the non-modern technologies can't deliver the services.
Thanks, Alan. And can I get just a comm check or radio check? Can you guys hear this if we have this on the table between us? Somebody online?
Yeah, I can hear you real well. The
Right,
the other handheld mic, you need to speak into it directly, but you're coming through good, I think.
All right, awesome. Thanks. Chris Smith, glad to be here with you all today. Excited for the conversation. I've got the marks to show for living through Networx, EIS, the predecessor to Networx as well on both sides of the fence. I've implemented in cabinet level agencies, Department of Agriculture under Networx, that full transition. Actually chaired the interagency committee with your predecessor, Alan, back at that time, and then was in industry, led AT&T's efforts with a number of my colleagues who are sitting around the table, and others within Verizon, Lumen, and the other 7 or so entities, Mentel. And so, those are no small undertakings. I'm not joking about the marks to show for it. They are big undertakings and they never go quickly. So as you said, you know, the breadth of the fabric of our civilization really is through communications, and it's becoming even more meshed as we go along, if you will, especially with now kind of terrestrial to satellite and things in space taking off at a even greater pace. The network is as important as it's ever been. And those speeds and the latency reductions that we're seeing are enabling things at the speeds we can't even imagine. You start looking at the 5G, which we've not even begun to really scratch the surface on, into 6G, quantum out there, AI disrupting. I was just amazed this morning. I was thinking about how far AI has come, even though it's narrow in most cases, right? It's some multimodal stuff, and not to the extent we're gonna talk about that. I'm not gonna belabor it, but our lives are being changed. I mean, search as we think about it, which was a big thing a few years ago, is gone. It's now driven by AI in most aspects of our life. Emergency room, doctors' offices, they're using it for their protocols. Anyhow, I'm not going to dive too deep into that, but it's an exciting time for all of us. It's going to be highly disruptive. My background is I've had military time, put global networks, tactical networks in around the globe. I was in government for many years, culminating with CIO at Ag. Ran AT&T's public sector business, and ultimately CPO, then Chief Operating Officer. I can't keep a job, is basically what it will be. Farming now and doing a little consulting.
Hi, everybody. My name is Narendra. I actually have a background in cellular world, mostly in the wireless area. Did a lot of deployments, mostly in the US and some overseas. I did also work on some satellite very briefly. And most of my work today is actually related to cellular still. But I do other things such as roadmap development, standards development for smart cities, and a few other things. My background in the public sector includes work as some consulting work for FirstNet and USDA and NVDA as well. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. Sam Hughes. I am honored to be the moderator of this panel today. Megan Daly and myself, we were co-leads for the emerging technologies, future requirements for the NextGen EIS. So we've been spending a whole lot of time getting smart on the technologies, where we think EIS is going. My background, I've spent my entire career in federal, spent a lot of time with a lot of SIs, or a handful of SIs. Longest stint with AT&T, where I played a pivotal role in AT&T's successful bid for the EIS, GWAC, as well as several task orders. So this will give you guys a quick rundown of how we're going to moderate things. Right? So throughout the discussion, we'll pull up a poll for the audience to answer their polling questions. And we'll do that sporadically between discussion topics as we move forward. So if we can we pull up the polling question?
Oh, let me first do the. There is also a link in the chat for those who are online. You can just go through the link. And for those in person, just scan the QR code.
Okay, first question. What will likely be the biggest challenge agencies face transitioning to NextGen EIS services? We'll give everyone a few seconds to input their answers. So as the answers are coming in, it looks like continuous transformation at scale. It's the big issue everyone agrees.
How many people do we have online? 10 up there, so I was pulling.
Looks like 10, 11.
How many we have online?
16. 16. 16. All right, awesome. All right, so let's jump right in. We're gonna cover five areas in our discussions. First area is going to be agency strategy and roadmap development. And so the first question to me, how can agencies develop actionable roadmaps based on emerging technologies and specific agency needs without formal mandates?
I'll take that first stab. The first thing, agencies shouldn't need a mandate to modernize. They need a roadmap though, to show where their services are needed. Technologies are going to evolve no matter what. What you need to focus on is roadmap and what are the services you need. I'm not a believer in buying technology. I'm a believer in saying this is the service I need. And the technologies will fill in. That's how emerging technologies fill those gaps. When you set that vision, one of the things I did in my past role is I set out a 5-year roadmap. And that roadmap was intended to let technologies fill the capabilities needed to deliver those services. The roadmap was aligned to the mission, the strategic goals of the agency. What are the agency's goals? I need a roadmap to align to deliver those goals. The technologies come in and fill those with the services. We got to stop thinking of 5G, 6G, et cetera. We got to, we need the broadband, we need Ethernet cables, we need service providers that deliver the technologies and modernize as technology evolved. The cloud has evolved itself. When you first started, it was infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. But those technologies now, that approach is obsolete. You got codeless environment. You used to code. Now you can do codeless. So don't buy a technology, buy the service as an agency. Roadmap it out, make sure that it is clear so the providers can come in. There's many ways to deliver the service. The technologies that are there will evolve on their own.
Yeah, and I'll add to what Alan just said. It's not, the roadmap is broader than emerging technology, innovation and all that, right? It is your strategy to achieve your mission, whatever it may be, and multiple large cabinet level organizations have all sorts of missions going on underneath of it. So having a solid understanding of your business you're about, your mission is what leads it. And I think it's actually structure that you have to have. And that is, starts with an environment in which innovation and risk rewards, right, are out there so that people have a kind of an opportunistic structure to operate within. The risk side of that is giving them the ability to go out and do things. You can't centrally demand, transformation and innovation. Yeah, you can set the parameters for it, but it's an environment as a leader that you've got to set up. And I would say one of the most important things is having a long-term acquisition strategy, which is shown very much in the past administration, right, with the necking down of the number of contracts because it's gotten out of control over time, and having that very clear strategy, again, mission with that environment and the acquisition. I used to put up on my board when I was a cabinet level CIO what I was going to buy for the next 3 to 5 years. And I didn't care if vendors walked in and saw it or not. I didn't say I'm going to buy your widget. I basically said, I'm going to go do this, right? These are my priorities. They line up with secretaries. They line up with our employees and the constituents that we served up there. And then last I would say is some sort of, I call it fun, risk, and reward together, but you want to reward that kind of entrepreneurial spirit within your organization. And that gets into training and how do you do technical kind of sessions that keep people excited. Technical people in particular who would deliver on that modernization have got to be, put together and excited about what's going on. So some of the things that we did over time in government and industry was making sure that we had an environment in which people shared what was going on. And you never got upset when somebody was doing something you might not have known about. You actually relished in that and people learned from it. So, okay,
Yeah, that's really good. I actually want to add a little bit to that too, because part of what I've been doing for a lot of transformation roadmaps over the years, I think it has changed because there has been so many things like cloud that are now self-evolving. And I think the way that we usually approach it now is I've been trying to look at what is the industry gonna look like in that next 5 years, and then almost reverse engineering from there, because it's going so quickly now. You need to think about like, what is it going to look like then, and how do you backtrack that from an acquisition standpoint? You might not know what those exact tools are gonna be, but you kind of have an idea of where the agencies are going to sit. Some of them are going to be ahead of where industry is, some are going to be behind, some are going to be spot on, and the technologies are going to keep changing even faster than they have been. So how do you like build that roadmap almost backwards from the further point?
Yeah, and I'm just gonna throw one thing out, is having an environment, that's the environment, that the cultural aspect of it, but having an environment with tools for people to be able to try things, labs, so, to an industry, core, and then government has labs as well, but if you look at how industry does, what we were just talking about, it's taking chances out with operational technology, not necessarily throwing it into the mainstream production, but testing, failing fast, all those things we've all talked about for years and years. I think that's critically important.
I mean, to add to actually Chris and Alan and Christine. So basically, the way we look at it, for example, in IEEE, it's obviously a tech-centric approach there, but we mix it also with products and services from an ecosystem's point of view for context and from a governance point of view. So the one that's the basic starting point we will look at is what are the main pain points, what are the problems we solve, and how do you get to that end stage. So it's a bit of looking forwards, reasoning backwards, as Christine mentioned before. And as far as what services and which areas can you serve that you're not quite reaching? So it's extending your reach, or areas that you're serving and you can deepen the types of services that you have. So the combination of all of this can be used and grouped together by a framework that we use that includes the ecosystems for contextualized products and services. And it's a networks for information and situational awareness. And by networks, we're not talking about any specific type of network or technology. It's the ability to have the information with. So it is a solution set approach. And of course, governance, when we're looking at near-term and long-term perspective from a time perspective.
Awesome. So staying on strategy and roadmap development, from the perspective of the government, what drives modernization decisions today? Performance, cost, security, or acquisition flexibility? Christina, you're representing. More than that.
I have thoughts on that. So I think there's a lot of things. There's obviously the efficiency and costs. You want things to be more efficient, you want things to be more cost effective for the taxpayer, those are huge. But I think there's also a difference there compared to industry, where you're really looking at the experience that you're getting at the end of that. So it's either the citizen experience, who is that end user, the government is serving somebody. And so they're taking input from the public, they're giving some input back to the public, and what is that function in the middle? And so from a modernization standpoint, it really comes down to how do you improve that experience, which is where it ties back to how you make it more cost efficient, because that does benefit them in the end. But for modernization, that again, it does tie back into the roadmap and how you scale things as well, because I think a lot of times there's really good pilots of modernization activities across the government, and those can be really hard to scale just because it's a massive system. And so how you actually bring that goodness to the entire enterprise, and that's where all the engineering work happens behind the scenes. And making that repeatable is hard to do, but that's also where, bringing in more from the networking side, networking and telecommunications, that's part of the whole backbone of the system. And so if you can't modernize just at that infrastructure level, those pilots can't really get anywhere. So it's really tying that whole picture together.
I was just going to add that we all say it over and over again, but it's the business you're about, the mission that you're on, right? It is the primary driver. But then performance to me is kind of number two. And it never ceased to amaze me when I was in government how many people did not want to do something because they said, well, you can't do it. It's like, what are you talking about? Why would we ever set out to do something we can't do? And why would we put anybody in a position where we're going to have failure in business continuity? It was ridiculous, right? It was really trying to change the dynamic to saying, hey, look, we're enabling the mission, so let's go do it together. But I cannot tell you how many foot draggers, how many people were racing to the back of the line. And it goes on today. It's unbelievable. Right, so performance is showing quickly functionality, capability, and then performing, right, with that business continuity, with whatever you want to use as your metrics. And then I would say cost. And one of the things we always get wrapped around the axle on when we talk about this stuff within government and industry, government probably more so, is that people don't want to get off of something because it works well. Once you put something in, I swear to goodness, even if they hate it, I put a financial system in, or I came in on the heels of the financial system that GSA was put in. People hate it. It was mutiny, right? So we came in, did the non-sexy stuff on the back end to get all the IT service management down, the cost and performance. Then when we went to do the upgrade, nobody wanted to do the upgrade, right? So the reality though is there's a bathtub curve in technology, right? There's a high cost of entry. When everybody goes onto it, it's working well, it drops, kind of bottoms out, and then it becomes out of date and the costs start going up. It's hard to fix. People stop servicing it. And so you get to the other top, the rim of the bathtub, right on the other side. So I would say cost from my perspective is number 3. We're going to talk about, I think, TDM, and that's all MPLS in there, which isn't really a dying technology, but TDM is one that needs to go away. Time division multiplexing for people who love the acronyms out there. The cost is through the roof. And we had one customer where AT&T, I'm a couple of my colleagues around the table, and it could be again Verizon, Metel, Granite, Lumen out there. TDM costs, or they go to something called tariff, which is after it's not serviced for a period of time, your cost can go up by 100, 200, 300% because it goes out of a regulatory framework. And I know we were telling one of our customers, hey, if you don't get off, it's going to go out. And it was a huge spike, 300% we had to take them up. Now, I had to fight and go on my sword back in AT&T, which is a pretty big financial company if you haven't checked recently. And the reality was like, no, you got to take it up. We cannot not do this. And there's by law what you can do. So we met in the middle. But the reality is that cost was going to keep going up to that customer. This customer had like 30,000 plus retail locations. So figure out how they work.
Good, awesome, thank you. All right, so moving on.
So yeah, did you have a comment?
I'm not.
Okay, I'm going to put a different hat on this because when you talk about performance, cost, security, acquisition, flexibility, if you don't have acquisition flexibility, you cannot benefit from the security, the costs, and performance. It is the biggest constraint. Acquisitions are meant to create a box to evaluate and control what is delivered. The problem with that is that we have disparate contracts. We're not able to consolidate the services that are like to optimize. And it's all because of different acquisitions approaches that have been used to deliver the services. I was dealing where I had not only 7 task orders on EIS, I also had other contracts that were not even on EIS. There was no way to bring improve security, no way to improve performance, no way to reduce costs because I didn't have acquisition flexibility. If you don't solve the acquisition need, agencies will continue to not be able to create the best performance, security, and cost savings to the taxpayers. And nor can your providers deliver what's of the best value for you either. So as long as we have a lack of acquisition, I think the RFOs are going to be tremendous at helping bringing that. I think the hope is that the next generation EIS leverages the RFOs to deliver a true acquisition flexibility so that one, emergent technologies can be brought in, services can, but things are changing quarterly now, and you need to be able to bring those in. But if you have to have 10 different contracts with different types of constraints, you're never going to achieve those other 3.
Hey, one brief comment to that. Actually, I know we're talking and we're looking towards the future with roadmaps and all of that, but a lot of the issues that are described here are really about operations as well. So we do have to kind of put that in context as well as how are we doing through periodic checks, and that includes the cost and the usage, and does it make sense to start a migration path of what we're doing. So that could be addressed through operations touch points along the way.
Great, thank you. All right, next focus area, emergent services. How can industry collaborate with agencies on roadmap development or emerging technologies, capabilities, use cases, and EIS service opportunities?
Sure. So, I mean, one of the big areas that I'm looking at right now is 6G, and not necessarily only from a technology-centric point of view, but for what it represents. So if there's one word that I would use to describe 6G, it would be convergence. So in that case, I mean, we're looking at some new types of classes of services that are actually quite new to the cellular world, and also could change as far as some of the application. And they are basically described in different categories, such as ISAC, or integrated sensing and communication. That is a huge use case that gives you the ability to sense your environment, to know if there's people around, especially for a disaster situation, public safety type of scenarios. There's also a matter of looking at objects and drones and vehicles and so on. So a huge class of services that is going to be fairly new. Think of it as radar in a way for cellular. And there is also a matter of AI, which is also going to be used within the 6G communications networks, but it also has ramifications as far as for applications as well. So I'm not going to belabor the AI. I'm pretty sure most people are on ubiquitous connectivity. We have some areas right now where we're seeing some sort of integration with satellite, but that is actually planned to be much deeper integration with different types of non-terrestrial systems, including UAVs and so on. And of course, we have wired wireless convergence with fiber networks as well. We basically think of this as one network. Then of course, we have the improvements of existing services such as immersive communications. The main use case that you're probably hearing a lot about is holographic communications, but it does not exist in isolation. You might think, okay, you need very high speed information or data rates of terabits per second. We're not going to see that in the first few iterations of 6G, but it's in the roadmap to be done later on. However, it doesn't exist in isolation, so you have to have very low data rates, very low latency, and computing powers. Are we talking about an image of a head? Are we talking a small image, a large image? There's a lot of computing capabilities needed for that. And going on for critical communications, we're looking at hyper reliable, low latency communications. So think of that as your transportation networks, your roads, rails, airspace, waterways, with shipping and so on. And of course, factories and different types of networks. With that, IoT actually will get a major overhaul with massive communications. So think of that with agriculture sector, healthcare sector, different areas where we have a lot of sensors that's in place. So all of these things are going to be phased in as far as when we're looking at 6G. And actually the timeline was just released where they're targeting completion of the first version of 6G by 2029. We'll have a great idea about what that means in 2028, but for the standards progression, they're targeting the completion in 2029. That's not that far away. So we need to basically start looking at that as far as how we can chart a course towards looking at that from a phased approach that was discussed earlier, to see what makes sense for different agencies to be able to do that for the different road mapping effort. And of course, there's different education and collaboration touch points, requests for information, and so on that agencies can employ to see what's going on, different types of trade groups, and there's going to be different works, education programs. All of this can be used to collaborate between industry and federal sector.
Yeah, I would say you need to get familiar with 5G first. The 6G is going to be fantastic, right? We're going from sub-millimeter wave to 5G in 1 to 3 gigs up to like terabyte per second in 6G, but we haven't even scratched the surface. There's not a lot going on with 5G out there. So I would actually say lean in now if you're a CIO, a CTO, find the use cases, then don't go find them because you're looking for technology to do, but take your mission, look for those opportunities that are out there and start putting a big toe in the water. Same thing that happened with LTE when we first started getting smartphones, when the first iPhone came out, we went to application-based technology on devices. LTE is what enabled that to occur. And I was involved in the first mobile summit that we had in the government. We set it up in DC and had government and industry come together. So getting to the point of how do you lean into the forward looking technologies, to start with the ones that are here that we're not even taking advantage of, right? We've got a problem in the government with looking at, and industry too, the silver shiny object that catches our attention, right? And running after it. And that's fantastic if you're enabling something within your organization. But I would say get out there, start using the technologies that are in place, and then use the acquisition strategy to have a broad aperture to be able to put these things together. The other thing that's right in front of us, other than 5G and not using it, and let's talk consumer. Where's 5G being used? So you can use the World Cup at stadium events or urban corridors where we've got massive amounts of people that all want data at their fingertips. So that's the biggest use. You've got industry using it in the manufacturing floor, but by and large, we're not using it as a country yet to the extent we can. It's certainly being adopted, right? Most people, a third of all subscriptions out there on like 7 billion devices is 5G. But, starting with that, then leaning into it and having the aperture then to buy that, to me, is the most critical part, because it's the workloads, right? It's the quantum, it's the AI, it's the cybersecurity, it's all these things that we can do with massive, better throughput. ISAC is going to be very interesting, but we can do a ton. We can do the drone detection. I think Ericsson just did off of their macro towers with MIMO, massive input, massive output, using that as reflection technology, right, to do the radar piece. Now that's only going to go like a mile, right? But the point is, these things are out there. So I think we need to start using them. And I keep looking at you because you're the acquisition guy. You tell us how we can buy this without putting it in the box.
So
Have a couple bucks.
So the one thing I'll say, that is actually an engineer, that
No,
just said,
I know.
just ruined my acquisition, it's not nice. No, I'll say this. Agencies are never going to out-engineer the market. They will never out-engineer. The thing is so don't stop doing PWSs and statements of works. Put a SUE out there. The use cases. If I say my statement of objective is to do X, Y, Z, achieve this, industry is better to come in and talk about the use cases that could fill that, right? They can't, agency does not have the technical apps to be able to do those things. And the thing is, like 5G, it is constantly maturing. I remember sitting in AT&T talking about how you subdivide the different spectrum and how do you use it? How do you prioritize it? How do you use traffic to manage business needs? So we're talking about Customs Border Patrol, right? And those things, but having a acquisition that allows that natural evolution, not revolution. We're in industry and agencies are always doing a revolutionary approach to deliver services. It's just rip it out, put something new in. You need evolutionary approach. And doing that is the acquisition flexibility is so critical, so that when some new capability is delivered, most of the things we're talking about, it'll go over 99% of what the agency says. They just cannot stay up with it. But the market will drive that. And letting the market drive is how fast new things are coming out. I mean, just look at the Iran conflict, and how things drastically evolved just shooting drones down. Just within days, they figured new ways to combat and make it inexpensive. Let the market be able to drive agencies' innovation, not agencies trying to control it.
I know we're gonna go to Christine, but I was gonna say, I wasn't joking about calling you the acquisition guy. He's a technology leader who took on an acquisition role for a while in his career. But what I was gonna say is every leader has got to be well versed in acquisition, because it shouldn't be a one-way communication with the contract. Contractors or contract officers are great, and the whole apparatus they're in, but it's a team effort.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think I'm going to answer kind of from the government and contract side, because it's two sides of the same problem. So I think from the government side, the challenge is industry definitely has the ability to drive the market for what is the latest capability and latest technology that we need to have. But on the government side, it's kind of like finding that needle in the haystack. You have a lot of good competition, but over time it becomes, you see hundreds of companies, and what is the one that can really get you to that future state that you're trying to get to? And so from the contracting side, I think a way that does help a lot with doing that collaboration between industry and government is being able to really understand how you truly fit into the picture of how you're going to help that agency get there. And, you know, small companies is very different than like a large company who actually understands how to scale that. Doesn't mean they shouldn't be involved, but figure out what your role is in that. Is that, are you pairing with a larger company to help you figure out that scaling? Are you going to collaborate with several others? Like bringing that understanding to the government, I think helps a lot more in having that full picture. Because you're really showing that you're not just, you know, trying to sell a new capability like the other hundreds, is you really get what the solution is going to be. And I think it does tie back to that roadmap scenario. This is where we as industry know it's going. This is how we can get you there. And we understand what we're bringing, what our partners are bringing. And I think there's some unique ways that are coming out now about how agencies are doing that. Like I heard from one a few weeks ago that it's, instead of an RFI, they did a request for collaboration. It was very similar to an RFI, but it was really like respond to us and how you as a team are going to collaborate, because we know it's not going to be one company. You know it's not going to be one company. Tell us what that's going to look like. And I think that was huge. It's a good step in the right direction for acquisitions as well.
Agreed. Can I have those?
All right, I just wanted to comment as far as the view as far as the technologies with 5G and 6G. So no one is necessarily saying that we drop everything and wait for 6G. It has to be done as an evolutionary approach. And there are some cases, there was a lot of delays with 5G. And there are some specific areas such as network slicing, which is really only a small fraction of 5G's capabilities. But we need to look at everything in context. In fact, right now, there's actually still some 3G networks still around in continental US. So it's basically going to be a combination of different types of resources and capabilities. One advantage of 6G is going to be ISAC, which we don't have that capability. Same with ubiquitous connectivity with satellite, especially with the different frequency bands. The version we have today, it's not as best as good as it could be. So it's an evolution and some work in progress, and 6G will be able to give you that. So will you have all of the capabilities of 6G from day one? No, you won't. And you will still have 5G networks 10 years out into the future, same with 4G, as the network providers start to transition out. So just kind of want to look at it, basically all of the above. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. All right, let's see. Let's move to a polling question. If we can pull one up. The next. Should OMB require agencies to develop and maintain modernization and transition plans for NextGen EIS? To your responses.
Like that.
Is anybody government here?
It's unanimous.
Right. All right, it looks like yes is the consensus. And so moving on to the procurement focus area. So if NextGen EIS is meant to last a decade, how do we design it to remain relevant as technologies like 6G, AI native networks, immersive services mature faster than acquisition cycles?
I'll just, go ahead, Chris.
I'll just say a little bit. So I think there's two parts to this. I think one is, you know, trying to see what that future state's going to look like, but 10 years out is a really long time. And so I think there's another version of that now where the way that we build it now needs to assume, you know, you take the current state and think about how different things that you would plug into the infrastructure that you build today. So, you know, if SD-WAN is the current one today, how would you go to that future state, assuming that you would need to get to that SD-WAN software defined sort of scenario? You can do that now with SD-WAN. What's that next state going to be beyond that? You don't need to know exactly what it is, but thinking about making it composable, modular. What would you do if we didn't have this today? There's still some infrastructure underlying that you can, you know, think about from that composability standpoint. And I think that helps a lot with, you know, both knowing that it's going to change because it will, and not knowing exactly what that's going to be.
I'll take it from a continuous modernization. Don't write a contract that is for 10 years. Write a contract that can be refreshed 10 times. because things are evolving. And we can't, the FAR has been the worst enemy to government modernization. I just say that it is constrained. It's been intended to constrain what is done and to be able to measure. The problem with that is evolving so quickly now, and way services can be delivered or happening so quick now that you have an acquisition 5 years, 10 years, whatever. It is that box at that point in time, and you cannot have that. It needs to be able to evolve. So whether it's modular task orders, a BPA, or something that allows that as agencies mission priorities change, their strategy has to change, the services they have to change, that the acquisition doesn't have to be repeated every single time. Let it evolve. So make it a 10-year evolving contract, not a 10-year static contract.
Yeah, I'm where you are at, like on ramps or like periodic reviews. And I would say actually review the data and where we're at, kind of give ourselves a score, because having, I said, been on both sides, right? Implementing under Networx in the government agency and in industry, on EIS implementation across multiple agencies. What always bothered me was that people running the back line over and over again. It didn't want to go do the work. And so I may be throwing a few things out here, but I think incentivizing people to get it done so that we're actually working on modernization and not inventory shifts, which is what we spent in the first 5 years on these contracts, the last 2 iterations. Not anybody's per se fault, but I think have a stop point. Or either on ramp it and keep it going, or stop at some point and say, hey, how are we doing? And then, but the contracts are always trying to cover every aspect, you know what I mean? With the protests to go on. So I do get the other side of it, but that's where I think AI, actually we'd have an opportunity to build some tools with the right platform and say, hey, okay, let's do an analysis. Let's check this out without bias to the extent you can, and then adjust course based on what went wrong, what went right.
I think we're all pretty much saying the same thing, periodic reviews. And one way to do that is really more from an ops point of view, where we have more structured touch points where you say, let's see where we're going, and then update accordingly. But periodic reviews is basically there. Awesome.
So to the lessons learned.
Yes. So that, I'm glad you mentioned that. So what are some of the main lessons learned during EIS modernization?
I'll take that one from a CIO perspective first, and then I'll take it from a deputy assistant commissioner second. Walking in the door, I'll frame it this way: when you move out of your house and you sit there and you start pulling everything out, you're like, man, look at all this stuff I had. Didn't even realize. Well, that's what happened when I walked into that CIO job. I found constant, why wasn't this put on contract? Why is this over here? And the unearthing of things. To me, you want to mandate agencies get a complete inventory of every freaking network component on the network. Because that is where the opportunity to create security, performance, and cost. And the thing is what happens in these agencies is that there are things that are shadow IT. There are things, I have a call center over here and I have a call center. Well, I got 2 call centers. Why? There's no need for that. Why do I have a network contract where I deliver data services and another contract that I have where phone services? Why? And to me, that having a complete inventory so that can be looked at, digested, and saying, here are ways that a industry can come in and actually deliver the top end services that are secure. We're going to roadmap out quantum encryption. We're going to roadmap out 5G, 6G, and be able to say where those things can be delivered. When I came in, there was TDM still in location, and I'm like, well, why aren't we using LTE 5G? And then now there's locations that have LTE 5G and the TDM's removed, but did not see the inventory. So to me, agencies having a complete end-to-end comprehensive inventory, give that to industry to sit there and digest it.
You're here.
Yeah, I think I'll add a little bit to that too. I think there's new challenges related to acquisition that are coming up now with the new emerging technologies and trying to plan out for that over the next few years. And I'll even give like a specific example here. So I was doing a network modernization a few years ago. And part of that was looking forward to, well, we're getting more into cloud and AI, and we're gonna need a lot more compute, a lot more bandwidth. And so for the circuit upgrade, that question even came down to, do we get 1 gig circuits? Do we get 100 gig circuits? And the immediate reaction on the acquisition side was, well, we have the money, so let's just go ahead and spend as much as we need. But on the technology side, it was a scoped problem. We can bring in AI and cloud and other emerging technologies. We didn't have to spend all of the money on that. And so it's a combination between the acquisition, what the technology decision is, what the future outlook is. And that's a hard problem, but it's like that decision point several years in advance, bringing in more of the technology side to help figure out what is realistic, like what you actually need to do. And then it can tie back into the cost savings. Like you can still modernize, you can still do a lot on that side, but just thinking about it a little bit further ahead and thinking through that whole process.
I'm gonna put my DAC hat back on for a second too. Agencies, if they elect to determine their acquisition strategy, you will have everything under the sun. To me, it needs to be a federal IT acquisition strategy to modernize the federal networks, not a agency by agency approach. And create that framework so that everybody's all going on the same approach. When you having 7 EIS tasks, I'm like, yeah, this is the worst thing that could be done because no, I can't get software-defined networking to put in place. I can't sit there and eliminate PBXs because of the way the contract works. And so, you need to have it to where agencies are, this is your guardrails that you got to work with. You're going to do a suit. You're not going to do performance work statements. You're not going to do statements of work. You're going to do a suit. You're going to give industry an opportunity to propose. You're going to show your entire inventory and let OMB mandate that kind of stuff so that industry can actually do what is needed for the federal government. The biggest constraint is what we put in there ourselves in terms of how we do our acquisitions.
Yeah, and anybody who wants to do something other than that is nuts, right? So GSA is the right one to do that. I'm just gonna say, right, I haven't been on both sides, this three sides, and all the marks to show for it. GSA should be leading the effort. I think an actionable item you guys just kicking around is there should be and I know there was a scorecard this last time around, but a scorecard that's publicly listed. I'm not a big fan of mandates, but a scorecard that people have to act to, and that tying the inventory to that modernization roadmap you're just talking about, Chris, and I can't tell you how much time I spent looking out. I mean, the good leaders do that, right? They're looking out into the future and saying, hey, what's the world going to look like? You talked about that earlier on, and how am I going to scale my network to that? But now we've got a lot of tools that allow you to optimize the network using, it could be even the buzzword AI out there. I mean, that's what the large telecoms are doing, right? They're optimizing their network. They're making investment decisions upon the models that they're developing. There's no reason you couldn't have an inventory tool that was developed, between industry and government that took out a lot of the pain for the agencies that you were hitting on, but then doing that forecasting and saying, hey, an agency of this type of mission set with, this type of user base and constituent base would look like this. I mean, that would be huge for people. And then having a red, yellow, green, hey, your modernization roadmap done based on an inventory that you've got, and you've got 5 years, putting those types of things out there, I think would be huge. The one item I had in lessons learned though is there was a clause, and you guys did a really good job with this. There was a clause, like it was PRA, like a price adjustment. But we had the worst inflation in our history in a short period of time, for a number of factors. I'm not being political about this, but inflation went 22-30% up. And the companies that were providing the service that the government was paying for had our costs go up. Right, and you had some within saying they didn't want to pay that, and you guys had the ability to do it, but you only did one portion of it. And then we had to go out as industry and go to our customers. I had people even in my own organization and industry saying, I don't want to pass on a film. Then I'm like, what are you talking about? This is dollars and cents. It's an American company. It's an American government. Nobody should be losing money here, right? I mean, taxpayers want their dollars spent right, but our capitalist society need to have industry operating and making a decent profit off of it. And it was a bad spot there from 20 to about 22-ish, right? I mean, costs of writing themselves. But you get something like TDM going on where you've got those, legacy stuff going out. You start putting those together. So I think one of the things we need is strong language, not where the industry has to go to the agencies to ask for them. We as a whole government and industry should say, hey, there's price adjustments for things that make sense. And this was inflationary. So that's the one item that I have. And had I been on the other side, I would have been said, hey, yeah, I got to go to Congress and get the money for this, right? I didn't plan for it. That's the other side of you got a problem in your budget. But we all as a country should be able to deal with that, but that's great.
I definitely agree as far as the inventory being the critical starting point, modernization approach, and the ability to look at it from a cost perspective. I think the missing area that may be of interest here is when we're looking at inventory, what does that really mean? I think one lost opportunity is to really understand what the inventory is for a particular facility, because if you may have errors in the addresses, errors in location, site codes, and so on. So the ability to put that in perspective as far as a location-based approach, maybe by way of GIS or something like that. So at least understand what's actually in that facility before you even start. And then you can have those discussions and what makes sense to modernize. Do you really want to do a like for like, or do you want to go towards transformation? Then you can have those particular discussions, and you could look at it from a cost savings point of view by bundling different types of services. But that key point that I think is missing is the ability to look at it not only from inventory, but from a location point of view to aggregate all of the facilities, all of the capabilities you have.
That was a huge pain point. Right? Yeah, but there's also speeds and feeds on the technology side. So I think it's all of the above, right?
Yeah. Great. Fantastic. Okay. Can we go to the last polling question? This one is going to be extremely polarizing, so everyone prepare yourself. Should agencies be required to replace end-of-life legacy technologies such as TDM under the NextGen EIS contract? Yeah. Yeah, polarizing just like I
Shouldn't be polarized. It shouldn't be. That's the reason why you don't want to be a legacy technology cost, security, but go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, July 2032 is what we're talking about when EIS ends. God help us if we still have.
Right. Awesome. So in the essence of time, would like to give an opportunity for the audience to ask a couple of questions. Like, when I ask the panel a closeout question, each one of you give me your answer. What is one thing government and industry must start doing differently together to ensure NextGen EIS enables future federal missions?
Basically look at different ways to approach your roadmap development to see what makes sense as far as looking to solve immediate problems and future problems. And you can look at it from periodic touch points, have different types of working groups, and collaborate accordingly with the different groups there. And it should be a multi-agency approach because there's a lot of commonality there. So it doesn't have to be limited to just one particular agency. And basically start from there.
Yeah, I'll build on what Narendra said. I think there's a 1 or 2 year somewhere there in forum in which that communications can occur, and it needs to be no holds barred, right? And people not hiding behind whatever trade secrets or I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but what we've never really had, and I think you guys have tried, we've had good sessions, but there's never been a really good session on where's the technology going. Verizon opens up the hood to the extent they can, AT&T, Lumen, and the agencies come in and do the same thing, kind of a large, mid, and small form, because everybody doesn't get everything out of one group. But I think they benefit the country in a huge way, because most of this stuff is not proprietary. There are waves that are happening, there are investments that are being made, and together we can move the whole country forward if we're open and have this kind of technology summit around this in particular network. Because it's the lifeblood of all the workloads that everybody's operating.
Yeah, I would say, I think I think there are a lot of ways that we as like industry and government have tried to do collaboration over the decades. And I think the challenge there, and I'm guilty of it myself on the government side as well, the challenge there is the thinking about how to actually modernize systems is it's always a priority, but it's never as high of a priority as keeping the lights on. And so it always takes a back seat. We have all kinds of working groups and I've done it as well. But it's never an operational priority. And so maybe what we do now is take advantage of the government pushing more towards the outcome-based firm fixed price, maybe actually something to force some of that collaboration where it's not just a discussion. It's another working group, but something a little bit more actionable than that, I think is where we really need to go.
I'll put it from my old chair of CIO. We need partners as a government. And to do that, we need to stop writing requirements once a decade. We need to have a continuous backlog. So I'm a big believer of strategic portfolio management. And as requirements come in, those demands should be there where industry can look at those things and figure out what can be done today, what needs to be done down the road. So today I can deliver this within the next 6 months, 12 months. These things you have in backlog requires agreement to do that. But that ability to continually update as things don't stop hiding the requirements, put it out there, keep it a living document. And so that way industry can respond and deliver at market time, not at government 10 years down the road approach. That gets us in a revolutionary approach for acquisition, but not a modernization vice evolutionary. So I ran a complete strategic portfolio where it had everything that was in demand. And these things that were in demand are all things that needed to be filled. But I couldn't necessarily prioritize best by doing it myself. So by having my partners in the room to say, we can do this today, this requires a little bit more planning than for tomorrow. That allowed us to move much faster.
Awesome. I want to thank you for the feedback. I think we have time for a couple of questions.
There is one from Amy Fadida.
Can you read that, Sam? Oh, okay. Hold on a sec. From a procurement perspective, is GSA taking the RFO and changes in acquisition policy into consideration when developing the model for the next gen of EIS? So she's talking about, for example, there's more flexibility in IDIQs to keep costs down. And let's see, eliminating markups, things like that. I don't know that you guys. Okay, thanks.
One restriction that EIS currently has, it cannot have BPAs built on of the regulations. What the RFO does, it enables BPAs to be used within the IDIQ structure. And so that opens that door. I think it'd be I'm a fan of BPAs because that allows me when I have something new come up that, you know, chairman or chairwoman came to me and says, I need this. I was able to do it quickly because I had access to that. If I didn't have it, it would have been a long drawn out process and was able to deliver that in 30 days because of that. IDIQ is going to be a lot longer timeline than the BPA, but even a new contract is going to be a lot longer than the IDIQ. So to me, I would hope that it would be incorporated. I think it's a good strategy because it doesn't give that acquisition flexibility.
Any other questions?
And Amy, if that didn't characterize it, feel free to speak up, but I see you nodding, so let's.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
I got one question for the whole group. How can we move more quickly? Having lived through a few of these, we lose 5 years up at the front. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we just do by the time inventories are done, the acquisition is in place, protests are out of our control, but it's like 5 years, right?
Yeah, well, the first thing, GSA is doing the right thing. What in 2024, it came out with its RFI. So it is starting that ball rolling. It really becomes making it a priority for all agencies.
Yeah, I'm not saying GSA making the contract, I'm saying once the this contract was put in place in 2017. I think the first agency we had, but we were some of the first movers. It was like a 2020-ish, right? And then the transition took place, but it was really in earnest 2022, so it was like 5 years off the contract.
Yeah. I mean,
And of course, same thing happened.
yeah.
I just wondered what kind of risks, carrot and stick or something we could put up.
Well, I think I agree with you but there was a number of factors that drove that delay. The biggest thing is that you didn't have where EIS now you have at least most of the services now are consolidated on it, so it's much better. But my team, Debbie and her team was like constantly trying to find inventory, constantly, what service you still got going. It was a constant, and you had hundreds of different contracts that just trying to reconcile. Agencies that know what they have. They still don't know what they have today, but it's better than what it used to be. But that's why I'm saying the inventory start now. That helps because you can't walk out and begin doing that. The other thing had to do with standing up the business systems, the VSSs, and getting those up and going through the ATO process, and where we worked hand in hand with the 9 vendors to get their ATOs done. But it was something new. It was, and now I think our FedRAMP process is has gotten better, but the ability to leverage things that are more secure, and there's ways to do that will reduce the timeline. But I think if I recall correctly, it was 2019 when we started getting the ATOs done, so that no company could deliver services without the VSSs being ATO.
Yeah, I would suggest that if that was what it was inner workings in that 5-year period, I think, this working group or GSA and going forward, a good actionable item from my perspective is dissect that. I mean, I can tell you on the industry side, we spent a lot of money to get those systems in place. It was painful. So, I mean, I think we could peel that apart and try and figure out how do we get 5 years down to a year or two. That would be an aspirational goal. And I think it goes back to the inventory. And then I look at it with your modernization thing, which is, hey, right, everybody has to know what they have and know where they're going as GSA is putting, all the pieces in place. That to me would be huge on.
Yeah, I would say
side of this.
Yeah, I would say if your inventory isn't in Connexus today, agencies are required to put it in Connexus.
Yeah, I think that actually hits exactly on it. It's not even just this contract, like a lot of contracts have this problem too. And I think that lack of insight is a huge aspect for that because it's not even just inventory, it's really all the processes. I know there are a few agencies over the last couple of years, really last year, that have been trying to push more towards all the different names, common operating picture, common operating environment, and really just being able to get that insight across the entire agency for the benefit of PIO, who has responsibilities under Katara to understand what's happening at his agency from an IT perspective. And there's no easy way to do that today. And so it just becomes things where, we know it's a big behemoth, it's too much to unwrap, so we're just gonna, do our best, but it's not really gonna change. And I think until we get to that point, which I think we can do more with AI now, but it's gonna be difficult. I think until we get to that point, it's gonna keep being the same issue.
Yeah, I would just say that there are a lot of asset management tools that have been out for a long time now that should allow us to do that in more automated fashion and pile AI on top of that. Maybe that's an area that's a mandate that's not, like, I'm not a big fan of the mandate, I'll say it every time, but, having a clean inventory, that's kind of a no-brainer. That's an easy one for me to say, hey, to get your money each year, you need to have this.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely starting with inventory, especially from you clean it up as far as from a location point of view as well. Look at what's coming up as far as the technology roadmaps to see what makes sense for your solutions. And even when we're looking at VSS approaches, look at are there any kind of standardized approach that you think that can be useful there? That would also help. That's the ability to scale very quickly.
So I'll talk this way. Having a common framework of how acquisitions have to be done with the inventory mandate requirement, right? That allows that process to do faster. The agencies, GSA did heroic efforts to try to help every agency out. There were some agencies we were sitting there for 2-3 years helping them put acquisition plans together. And just put a pin on it and just to go forward and stuff, but they would change direction. And to me, without that framework of saying, this is how you're gonna work together to get the acquisition out so that the industry can respond timely and before EIS expires and not sit here and constantly move things. To me, putting those things together will help it make it easier.
Awesome, fantastic, wonderful exchange, great discussion. Would love to thank the panel, for their insights. Great. Very good. Team, in the background to help put this all together and, hope everyone has a productive day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna see if I got you.
Yeah.
Good job.
Should have to roll it.
This is really just.